The SMU loss was a tough one because it appeared that Virginia was the better basketball team. They have a pretty stiff test coming up next week, the Hoos, against Memphis. Memphis is a basketball team that's going to have a lot of athletes. Like and share the show. Let us know where you are watching. Put your comments in the feed, and we'll relay them live on air. The Memphis Tigers visit the John Paul Jones Arena on Wednesday, December 8th. Of course, Bethune-Cookman, what do you call them, a rent-a-victim?
Yep.
A rent-a-victim on Thursday. Like and share the show. We're going to have some fun. I'm already seeing the comments about what was announced today, which we just caught before the show started, Hootie, about the NIL with Virginia Tech. A lot of folks watching. A lot of folks I can see. I think this might be another therapy session here. Judah Wickower, we can rock and roll when you're ready. Good Tuesday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller. Thank you kindly for joining us on the Jerry and Jerry Show, a program that is live on social media and podcasting platforms all over the world. Today's program is dynamic. We encourage you, the viewer and listener, to join us in the discussion. Share your thoughts, share your ideas, ask questions, share your concerns. I think there is quite a bit of concern in Wahoo Nation as this Virginia basketball team seems to be, at least in the early stages of the season, underachieving. A wise man once told me, his name Fletcher Arrett, the late Fork Union Military Academy postgraduate basketball coach, that in college hoops, anything before New Year's really does not matter. That may be the case, but it certainly will get the fan base riled up. And an SMU loss to the tune of 63-51 in Dallas, Texas, has a lot of us scratching our heads. We'll talk basketball with Hootie Ratcliffe. We'll talk transfer portal with the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer. Judah Wickower is behind the camera. He's our glue guy. If you can go to the studio camera and then a two-shot and welcome the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer. My phone is buzzing with questions for Hootie Ratcliffe already. First, Tuesday morning, my friend, good morning.
Good morning to you, and hope everything is well.
Everything is well?
I've been under the weather a little bit, but I'm bouncing back.
It looks like you've shaked it.
Yeah, I think so. I hope I can get through the broadcast without coughing. But
you got a little more color in the face here.
I feel a lot better.
That's good.
Almost feel human again.
Well, it's great to sit across from you per usual. We'll start, as we always do, open-ended. The awesome aspects of your columns, in particular, some of my favorite ones was the scatter shooting column. Scatter shooting, Hootie Ratcliffe, where would you like to begin?
Well, I think the basketball team, I agree with you. I think Virginia was a better team than SMU, but it's tough to go on the road, especially back-to-back road games where you weren't at home in between, because they flew from Florida to Dallas. So, but that wasn't the problem as much as having two starters essentially miss the entire game, with Day Ames going down after 7 minutes with an ankle issue that we still aren't sure the degree of that injury, and the fact that Elijah Saunders was in foul trouble the entire time and practically didn't play at all. And that's two of the main characters in your lineup, and to go on the road like that and be missing those two key players it's like playing with one hand tied behind your back, and we saw the result. And Virginia, as Tony Bennett used to say, walks such a thin line that you can't afford for that to happen, because it's still a young basketball team, and there's just no one there to come in and step into those roles and make an impact at this point. Before the season's over, there probably will be, but at this point of the season, it's just too early for them to be able to bounce back from something like that. And I think that's why we saw the scoring droughts and why we saw the Mustangs be able to go on a couple of runs like that. He just didn't have the personnel to stop it.
Significant scoring droughts against the Mustangs. Waynesboro's finest, Kevin Yancey, says good morning to the crew. He also wants us to talk about the transfer portal and the concerns with filling out the roster. That is certainly a topic we'll talk about today, Mr. Kevin Yancey. Olivia Branch watching the program. Thank you kindly for watching us. The TV station down the road watching us right now. I'm going to be very straightforward here. Ron Sanchez has said to all of us, the only thing that separates me from Tony Bennett is a boatload of victories and in titles and championships.
A little over 300.
A little over 300. He referenced the fact that Tony's got a lot of wins. I don't have a lot of wins,
right.
But we run the same program and we coach the exact same. Very straightforward question for you. In a transfer portal era, does the pack line, a slow-down tempoed offense that really is trying to minimize possessions, and Bennett basketball, does that still work today?
Well, we'll see. It's going to be a great experiment to see how that develops under Ron. Certainly he's a disciple of Tony Bennett and tries to do things the same way. I'm sure he's coaching his butt off over there trying to advance the youth of this team, but it's awfully hard to get young players to grow up quicker than they're ready to, and so that's a little bit of a handicap. But that's the big question right now is
because you look at the starting lineup. Day-Day's new,
right?
Elijah Saunders is new.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing Kofi in a very key role.
Yeah.
You're trying to get TJ Power up to speed, and TJ Power, frankly, looks like he's not going to get off the bench this year, at least at this point of the season. You got key guys on the team that are completely new to the program, trying to learn a nuanced defense and offense.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. And in a developmental program like this, it's a great experiment to see if they can advance those guys and how long does it take for them. And it may be on an individual basis on how quickly some of these guys can learn and adapt. We won't know the answer to that for a while, and it's going to be the challenge of Ron Sanchez into whether he can take the interim tag off of this job title as to whether he can develop these guys into some kind of fans' expectations and his own expectations as to whether these guys can duplicate Tony's success and get to the NCAA tournament and be effective in the ACC. And can you do that in this day and age with transfer players trying to learn something that sometimes will take a year or two? Can they do that on the fly? I don't know if anybody has the answers to that, Jerry. And this year will answer that question as to whether it can be done or not. And if it can't, then I don't know what direction you go in.
Kevin Higgins makes a very good point. Greenwood, Virginia's finest. Ron Sanchez was 72 and 78 at Charlotte. I'm sure he's a great guy and understands Tony Bennett's coaching program well. It's one thing to understand a process, but a coach has to adapt in a split second in real-life conditions. I just don't see it happening. These are young men, but we are ages away from hanging with the Duke Blue Devils and the top teams of the UNC, the top teams of the ACC. I love UVA, but no dice, guys. UVA basketball and football will unfortunately be at the bottom for a while. This comment this type of comment is everywhere right now on the feed.
Yeah, no, he could be right. I don't know how you turn the football program around with they're losing 50-plus players.
They lost roughly half the roster to exhausted eligibility.
Right.
And then more players have entered the transfer portal.
13 players entered the portal yesterday. I haven't checked today to see if there's any additions or not, but certainly it's easier in basketball because the numbers are significantly different. But again, we're talking about the developmental program as compared to Duke and Carolina, where you have to learn their systems, but it's not quite as complicated in terms of the pack line. I mean, it's tough, and in all fairness to Ron Sanchez, he took over a Charlotte program that was pretty much bankrupt, and he did build them into a winner. He had his best season at the end there with more than 20 wins, but and that was his first head coaching experience and all that goes with it. But I mean, he was given the keys to a Jaguar, and we'll see if he can drive it. I don't know. I mean, it's we're in a wild frontier that we've never seen before, and it's going to test people like nothing has ever tested them before. And it's almost like it's the haves and the have-nots, and we're seeing things change week by week, Jerry, like with the news you mentioned when we came on the air about Virginia Tech's decision on the money thing.
This is bananas. You want me to pass it along to them?
Yeah. Go ahead because I haven't read the story yet either. So
I haven't even finished reading the story.
I don't know the details.
This was released this morning. I haven't even finished reading the story. Virginia Tech plans on distributing. This is reported. This is news passed along to Bill Roth, Virginia Tech play-by-play broadcaster. He sat down with Whit Babcock on Friday, the athletic director of Virginia Tech, and now the Roanoke Times, Damian Sordelet from the Roanoke Times is reporting it. I'll read a few paragraphs from the story. Virginia Tech plans on distributing the maximum amount allowed in revenue sharing with student athletes for the 2025-2026 school year. Hokies athletic director Whit Babcock confirmed this in a sit-down interview with Bill Roth. The projected cap for revenue sharing with student athletes is $20,500,000. Virginia Tech is going to share the entire $20,500,000 with athletes. That figure is 22% of the average Power Conference school revenue from the previous year, and is expected the cap will rise 4% each year as part of the pending national settlement agreement. Schools can determine whether to share the full $20,500,000 or a portion of it with student athletes. Virginia Tech on Friday just said they are completely all in, pot committed to NIL and paying athletes.
Well, that's significant. It's going to be interesting to see what Virginia does in light of that. And like I said, things are changing week to week, and we don't know. We don't know what Virginia's going to do. Last week was significant in that the football program was given multi-million-dollar donation by an anonymous donor, and we assuming that most of that will be used for NIL money and other ways to recruit, and certainly that's significant. Again, we don't know how that they plan on using all that or any of their strategies, because one, we haven't had a chance to talk to anybody, but two, I don't know if they'll tell us anyway. But again, that still doesn't eliminate the obstacle that they're still going to have to go after mostly grad transfers because of the 60 hours thing that we were talking about last week, where that eliminates a lot of the underclassmen that you're trying to get to transfer in. We've heard over a week ago that more than a dozen guys had already been turned down by admissions, and that was more than a week ago. So it's a brand new world, and you better be ready to pony up, or you're going to get left behind, and it's that simple. And right now we're all left guessing in the dark as to how Virginia's going to approach these things, because we haven't heard anything.
John Allison, thank you for watching the program. Vanessa Parkhill, thank you for watching the program. James Watson, thank you for watching the program. Lisa Costello, Bill McChesney, just to name a few. This is a point that Mr. Higgins has made, and I think it's a very fair point, that Tony Elliott and the Virginia football staff knew that half the roster this year would have had exhausted eligibility.
Oh, absolutely.
They knew this a few years ago.
At least a year ago.
At least a year ago. He says, anyone running any business, if they allow something like that to happen and there's no plan in place, it makes no sense. This is a lifetime UVA fan making that comment.
Well, and he makes a very valid point. But, what else were they supposed to do? I mean, they were lucky that they got a lot of these guys to come back for an extra year. And a lot of them were benefactors of not only the COVID year, but also the tragedy extra year that they got. Most schools didn't even get that. So, and part of it was because when Tony Elliott got here, too, there were probably guys in the program that he probably felt like weren't ACC caliber players, but he didn't run them off. He decided to honor their scholarships and let them play through. So some of that was probably dead weight to begin with. But they're in a predicament. And, they signed 19 high school kids, which was good. They didn't lose any of their commitments. So that was important. And now they've got to make up the rest through the transfer portal and some preferred walk-ons. And college coaches at this moment still aren't sure what the scholarship limit's going to be because the NCAA hasn't announced that yet. They don't know if it's currently 85, but we don't know if we assume that's going to be expanded. Some people are guessing 105. Some people think it'll be less. So coaches' hands are a little bit tied on. They don't even know exactly how many new people they can bring in. So you talk about a complicated mess. I don't know. I mean, how many transfers is he planning on bringing in? Right now, if you bring in the 19 guys, we don't know how many are really left on the roster at this point. They've just had 13 say they're leaving, so that you're up +6 in that. But then there's the other 40 to 43 guys that have exhausted eligibility. So you're down, 49 players or so?
You're down half a roster.
You can't bring in 49 transfers, can you?
I don't have that answer. I literally don't know that answer.
I don't either.
I was going to ask you that question.
I mean, you can if you're Colorado. And
is half his roster going to be transfers?
It's got to be.
I mean,
and can they do that? Can they find 49 people that can qualify to get into UVA?
Do you hear what
you're not going to get 49 graduate transfers to come in here?
Right,
I guarantee you that.
Do you hear what the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer is saying here, guys? And Hootie Ratcliffe, he's going to have to replace half the roster with transfers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else you can do it.
And the folks they're targeting, I mean, you got what? A linebacker from East Carolina, an offensive lineman from Cal Poly, a defensive end from Kent State, an offensive lineman from Harvard, a wide receiver from North Texas, a defensive end from Elon, a defensive tackle from Fresno State, a defensive back from Miami of Ohio, and a defensive end from Elon. I mean, a running back from Penn. He's going after the transfers that are being targeted with scholarships are I'm not sure of ACC caliber player profile.
Well, I'm not sure either, and I'm not sure of that either, and that's why they're going. They're not winning. you can't win. I mean, you can take some of those guys and they can fill holes, and some of them are obviously better than perhaps they were given credit for when they were originally recruited or have developed in other programs. But when you're recruiting those kind of guys and your opponents are recruiting guys from FBS schools who have had some measure of success, you can't line up with those guys and expect to win. You can't do it. I don't, it's pure fantasy to think otherwise. I know that you feel like you can coach players up and all that stuff, but look at the evidence. 3 wins, 5 wins. I don't know how you get out of this hole. I really don't. It was hard enough under the old rules and the old methods. I don't know how you get out of this. I really don't.
And
and if you switch coaches, it's just the next coach is faced with the same set of problems. So I don't know if that's a solution or not.
You'll love this comment. Dave, is it Scarangella?
Scarangella
says, "How come you never age, Jerry Ratcliffe? The only difference.
He and I worked together a long time.
That's what he's saying. The only difference between what I'm seeing on my screen and what I saw looking across the desk at the Southwest Times in Pulaski many years ago is you don't wear glasses anymore. And don't tell me it's all due to clean living."
Well, it has been lately, that's for sure. But I had my moments in my youth, for sure, like most of us did. But Dave is a dear friend, and he was one of the first people that come to my aid when I lost my job and tried to help me get back on my feet again with a new venture. And we worked together in a couple of places in Pulaski when we tried some new things in the newspaper business that really hadn't been done before. Dave was a student at Virginia Tech, and I hired him, and we were over 3 newspapers in those days, 3 small-town newspapers, and one of them was, which is now defunct, but it was called the Blacksburg Sun, and we would put out, during football season and basketball season, we would put out, in those days, which was unheard of, a 14-page sports section.
Get out of town.
Yeah. And
especially for a community paper.
The Sunday paper was, the front section of the paper was the sports section, because we knew how important sports was to our readers. And so it was a grand experiment. I'm not sure that it worked, but it was fun and challenging, trying to fill up a 14-page sports section with a lot of space in it. And sometimes we were scrambling at 2 o'clock in the morning to run 30-inch soccer stories from
But you had a lot of agate over there.
The New York Cosmos or somebody. But Dave and I have been through a lot of pretty cool stuff in our careers, and he wisely got out of the business and got into the furniture business and did very well. And so a really intelligent guy.
Dave, he also hired me. I was out of UVA. You were out of Virginia Tech at the Daily Progress. And a lot of the viewers and listeners may not know this. With any newspaper, the most read section is the sports section. And it's not even close. It is not even close. The most read section was sports. The second most read section of a newspaper, a lot of folks probably don't know this either, was the obituaries.
Obituaries and back in the day, the want ads.
Yeah.
Classified ads, yeah.
That's right. And then after that, you start getting into the weather. Of course, the weather's been replaced by our phones. And then you get into the A section, the front page. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks don't realize that, the value of sports for a community. We'll get back to the topics at hand. Virginia Tech's athletic director, Whit Babcock, says that $20,500,000, the large majority of that will be shared with football, men's basketball, and women's basketball.
Yeah.
So the money's going to go to the revenue sports. And then he said this $20,500,000, Virginia Tech's athletic director, Whit Babcock, said, we're in fundraising mode. It's not like we just have $20 million lying around everywhere. We have this $20 million for the 25-26 athletic season, and we're literally grinding right now to build the war chest for the following season. And the expectation is it's going to uptick 4% every year. Folks, it's an arms race right now, college sports. And frankly speaking, I hate to say this, it's going to cause the gentrification of fan bases, because the fan base, the ticket experience, the concession experience, the parking experience is going to go up in costs to help cover this war chest, this arms race, this $20,500,000 that's being raised every year with a 4% compound increase every academic calendar year.
Wow, that puts a lot of pressure on a program, and when your fan base is not bought in,
that's where I wanted to go with.
That really complicates things.
Yeah.
And you were ahead of me, but you're exactly right. And
because you have to fill the stands now.
yeah, and I mean, and the Hokies are doing that.
The Hokies are doing it.
You look at that game in Blacksburg a little over a week ago. It was 31 degrees. At game time, I think it got down to
low 20s.
Low 20s.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was totally sold out, but
I think it was sold out.
I think there were 60-some thousand people there, and I mean that was huge, I think, and that shows you the difference in the two fan bases. If that game had been in Charlottesville, there might have been 35,000 people there, and a lot of them would have been wearing maroon probably. But I mean, Virginia didn't draw well this year, and what's it going to be like next fall? Because some people are disappointed that there wasn't a coaching change. Some people are disappointed that there wasn't at least some staff changes. The fact that
what do you make of the no staff changes?
I'm a little surprised. I kind of thought that there might be some kind of change. If nothing else, I thought maybe just for appearance sake that Tony Elliott might take over the play calling duties, and I guess he still could, and relegate his offensive coordinator to a lesser role, but if he didn't want to fire him, and which I think probably would have worked under the previous regime with Bronco Mendenhall, when he was upset that they wanted to fire his defensive coordinator, which was certainly justified. But I think had Bronco just taken over that role and kept the guy on his staff, I think things would have probably calmed down a little bit and they could have continued on. But change was forced, and we saw what happened. But again, I was surprised, because if it was any other normal program that has struggled like this one has, and I again, for those who are pointing out, well, this program's had obstacles no other program's ever had, I understand that, but still, you have the losingest record in FBS football over a 3-year span. One of the worst offenses in the country over a 3-year span.
Can't fill your stadium, can't beat your rival, losing in-state recruiting.
Yeah. And
have apathy at all-time high.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do something to appease your fan base, and nothing was done. I understand that the money could infuse some things into the program, but again, you can go after people, but are you going after the right people? I mean, if you fill your roster with guys from the Ivy League and FCS programs, I just don't know how much success you can have on this level. And are you going to do that year after year after year? Because if it is, you essentially become an FCS program.
You are an FCS program.
Yeah.
We're basically looking at a roster. Bob Shada, Birdwood's finest, watching the program. Kevin Yancey highlights the fact that a lot of these assistant coaches got contract extensions That surprising news recently came out, including the offensive coordinator, Des Kitchings.
Yeah, both coordinators did.
Both coordinators. People were flabbergasted by that. If you fill the roster with transfers from the Ivy League and from lower-tiered football, that is who you become.
And that's what Virginia has become. And you can't, you just can't finish in the upper half of the ACC by doing that. Prove me wrong, but that's my philosophy, is that it's just not going to work. I just don't see how that can possibly work.
Vanessa Parkhill wants some Calandria updates. Is Calandria officially in the portal? Any chance he could come back to UVA? And is Calandria getting interest from any programs currently?
Well, he's definitely in the portal. We don't have any connection to these guys once the season's over, unless you can just happen to run into them or something. But he's definitely in the portal. He could choose to come back, but I don't think he will. I'm not sure he would be welcomed back with open arms if he did ask to come back.
Oh, they'd roll out the red carpet.
Well, I would.
Yeah.
Especially when Tony Elliott said it wasn't his intention to run him off in the first place by benching him, although I think he had to have understood the possible repercussions of that when he did it.
The first thing I would have done,
which I thought was a mistake.
Huge mistake.
Yeah.
First thing I would have done if I was Tony Elliott after the anonymous donation this past Thursday afternoon is called Anthony Calandria and said, "How much money do you want?" Yeah,
it wouldn't have hurt. I mean, and I don't know if it's about money with Calandria because he's from a wealthy family, but I just thought it was a huge mistake putting him on the bench for the most important game of the season after having started 11 straight games. And I thought Virginia, and this is not throwing shadow on Tony Muskett because I admire everything he did, but Virginia had essentially no chance going into Blacksburg without Calandria starting at quarterback. I don't think they had much of a chance with him, but I think it could have been a closer game. And again, was it worth the risk of losing him to the portal by putting him on the bench?
Essentially,
I don't think so.
Making him the scapegoat, essentially perceived to be the guy who fell on the sword for the season struggles by benching the most important position, a position that has more attention than even the head coach.
Yeah, I don't understand that decision.
Yeah. It's Bob Shada's got a question. James Watson's got questions are all over the feed today, and I understand why. James Watson, what is the minimum amount of money that is needed to be donated to make a difference? Since we don't know what that donation was. So what Mr. Watson, who's a UVA graduate and a proud supporter of UVA athletics, is saying. How much money do we need to have a true impact? I'll try to add some color to that, some background to that, and then pass it along to you. The Roanoke Times story that's out today, Virginia Tech is going to share the full amount, $20,500,000 for the upcoming athletic season, and that $20,500,000 is primarily going to be shared with athletes football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. You got to believe that football and men's basketball are going to get the large lion's share of this. Virginia Tech is also saying it's raising money for the 2026-2027 season literally right now. I threw it to Hootie, and Hootie made the perfect analysis that Virginia Tech is filling its stadium, Lane Stadium, with fans, which allows it to continue filling the war chest with more money. UVA's football game, home games are losing more than $1 million per home game because of meager attendance, poor concession sales, poor merchandise sales, poor parking sales, etc. So we clearly have an issue here. The other issue that I'm seeing here that I want to pass to you, and then Bob Schott, I'm going to your comments here, is the TV deal, the revenue sharing with TV deals with conferences. It's going to put more priority on these TV deals, these revenue sharing deals with ESPN, whatever the network is. Now, if programs and athletic departments have to dish out $20,500,000 with a 4% increase every year with its athletes to stay relevant, that revenue sharing with the TV networks is critical.
Oh, no question. And I guess the big question is, will Virginia match what Virginia Tech's doing in terms of that $20.5 million?
I don't see how it can.
How can they afford not to?
Well, how do they do it? I guess.
That's the question. And
more anonymous donors.
Well, that's what the anonymous donor was hoping for with his gift or her gift. I don't know who. Obviously, don't know who it was, but that was one of their expressed desires, was challenging other people to step up and contribute and try to get Virginia over the hump. But is money alone going to do that?
I don't think it is.
That still doesn't solve some of the problems. And again, if you're having to go after grad transfers only, or at least a high percentage of those, and if they're all coming from the Ivy League or FCS or mid-major FBS schools, how can you compete on this level when your opponents are going after higher caliber athletes? And it's such a conundrum. I don't know what the answer is. I just don't know. They've never been faced with a problem quite like this before.
I think this is a bigger crossroads for the Virginia football team. The last time Virginia football has been in this predicament, and no one knows this better than you, was when George Welsh took over this program.
Yeah, and
because at that time you had my dad's, as I mentioned on the show, a Virginia graduate.
Mm-hmm.
He suffered through the Bestwick, Sonny Randall years. When he was in college, was passing out. He said, I passed out buttons to whoever would take one that said, "Fire Dick Bestwick" on it. And he speaks about George Welsh to this day as if the man walks on water.
Yeah, and I'll give Dick Bestwick some credit. I got to know him well, even though I didn't cover him, but I got to know him even though he wasn't even here anymore. I made it a point to get to know him and some of the other former coaches. Like Sonny Randall and some of the other, George Blackburn and some of the other guys. I reached out to him, and Dick Bestwick, even though he wasn't able to turn the program around, he did bring in some really good football players that George Welsh later down the road acknowledged Bestwick for that. And it's sort of, I don't want to take credit for it, but I kind of brought those two together because there had been some ill feelings by Bestwick that George had never given him credit for supplying at least a good base of some talented players like Jim Dombrowski and Barry Word and some of those guys that George won with and were key players in turning the program around. And George finally admitted that down the road, and I got a picture of those two together, and it meant the world to Dick Bestwick that George gave him some credit for that. But, still, even though Bestwick had brought in some talent, he wasn't able to turn the program around, and George was a miracle worker in the fact that he built on that and had a winning season in his second year and had Virginia in its first bowl game ever in his third year and beat the number 2 team in the Big Ten in the Peach Bowl in a very physical football game. George Welsh's just don't walk in the door, just like Tony Bennett's don't just walk in the door. These are Hall of Fame coaches, and if you're a fan base, you're probably lucky to have one every 5 to 10 generations of programs. And I think George had a little help. Virginia wasn't going to bend too much academically, but I think I think the president and the AD at that time probably went out of their way to try to help Georgia a little bit. I don't know in today's atmosphere if that's even possible. But Virginia's faced with a massive problem right now.
I think it's a more significant climb than when Welsh took over.
Oh, I do too.
Right now.
Because, they're in similar – they were in a bigger hole then. And Virginia has more money now. They have better facilities now. When Georgia was here, they wouldn't even bring recruits by the football stadium or any of that, or let them see that the coaches were working in trailers outside of University Hall. They would take them to University Hall and show them the basketball arena because facilities were so bad. But and they didn't have at that point they didn't have a football home per se like they do now. There was no McHugh Center, let alone a Hardy operations building, football operations building. But so in a lot of ways they're not in this big a hole, and they have had a little bit more success. I mean, they're coming off a season that could have been a bowl season for whatever that's worth. But there are other issues that have them handicapped in the ACC race. I don't know that excuse me. I don't know that there's any other ACC school that is faced with quite the same problems that Virginia has. And I'm not trying to pick on Virginia. I'm just trying to be a realist here. And
there's not a single ACC school that has these.
Yeah.
Not a single one. The other ones that are as academically rigorous as UVA are making academic requirements less stringent for its football program.
I think they're trying to work with the football program, and
Virginia's not.
Find ways to do that. If they are, they're not making it public, and they need to be a little more transparent over there and say, look, we realize what the situation is, and this is what we're trying to do. Just, if nothing else, just to let their fan base know, not just the big donors. Because a lot of that's part of the apathy, because a lot of the fan base believes that nobody cares. Throwing money on something is great, but it's not the solution to everything. You just got to let your fan base know that you're trying to do something, and nobody's asking them to dumb down their academic program and to make their diplomas less worthy. It's sort of the things that Duke and Carolina and Wake Forest and Georgia Tech have done to help football certainly hasn't tarnished their academic reputation.
Hell, if anything, it can make the academics, having success in football can make the academics even more prestigious. When Michael Vick took Virginia Tech to the national championship, applications to Virginia Tech the following years skyrocketed.
Same thing happened here when George was winning, and they were considered the hot school, and a lot of celebrities wanted their kids here. A lot of prominent athletes wanted their kids here. It makes a difference. And the donor that gave them multi-millions last week pointed that out, how important football is in bringing the alumni together in various ways. So, I mean, that's why they started or enhanced football here in the first place back in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, when they were really good, as the president of the school felt like that football was a gathering point for alumni and students, and helped attract all the good things in a university. So I don't understand what the resistance is.
John Blair, watching the program, he said he understands the concern about Calandria. He also highlights that the tight end position is something we should focus on. He brings up Neville, the transfer from Harvard, Williamsburg native, Williamsburg, Virginia native right there. He said he's gone. This is a massive hole on the offense that needs to be filled for Virginia. Bob Shada highlights this. We appreciate Birdwood's finest, Bob Shada, watching the program. Who's going to spend the money with this new donation? Who is going after the new talent and spending the additional donation dollars? It's not Carla Williams. It's not going to be Tony Elliott. Who's the one that's going to allocate the money and target the athletes? Is that the Cav Collective and Lo Davis that spends the millions that are in the NIL war chest?
I'm assuming that they're in charge of the money.
Chad Wood says, in Hootie, we appreciate your multi-million-dollar donation, but at least put your money on it. Put your name on it.
Well, you know, that's...
It was not Hootie that did the multi-million anonymous donation.
If I had multi-millions, I probably wouldn't be sitting here this morning.
This man would be at a golf course.
I would be in Tahiti or somewhere playing golf and sipping Mai Tais. But
hopefully you bring your friend Jerry with you.
That's right. You and I and Judah would all be sipping
your
Mai Tais
beautiful lady.
somewhere. That's right. But thanks for that acknowledgement anyway, though. But you know, I've talked to some people, excuse me, at UVA, and I know they're trying. I know they're trying hard, but I just don't know. I don't know how you get out of this hole. And I think they're just trying a lot of different things to see what might work and what might not. But I mean, it's just such a problem. I don't know how you overcome all these hurdles. You know, you can go out and buy all these guys, but again, if it's not, if you're lining up B players against A players every week, all the numbers and studies over the years have shown that just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, their transfer portal targets, there's 4 guys from Elon on the target list. From Elon. And I'm not trying to throw shade at Elon here, but there's 4 guys they're going after from Elon. John Allison says $20,500,000 for football, basketball should be pocket change for an institution that has a $14.5 billion endowment. This comment's come in. I mean, the show's on fire. Jeremy Wilson asked the question, how much of this mess, and I think the word mess is appropriate.
Good word.
How much of this mess is tied to Carla Williams? And how much of this mess should be put at the feet of President Jim Ryan?
Well, they both are responsible for this to some degree because they're the leaders of the school and the program. And again, they don't communicate that much with media, at least sports media. They don't have press conferences. They don't even put out press releases as to what they're thinking or what they're trying to do to resolve things. Even the multi-million-dollar gift last week, there was no comment from either one of those two in the release.
There wasn't. I was shocked by that.
I think most of us were. It was the deputy athletic director who...
and Lo Davis.
Yeah. And, I mean, where's the leadership? There's got to be some leadership in this. And I know that they're working behind the scenes to try to tackle the problems, and they don't want to share what they're doing with the rest of us. But again, I think they owe something to the fan base to at least acknowledge that they're trying to do something other than just throw money on the wall and see what happens.
James Watson's got a great question. This is a UVA graduate, guy who bleeds orange and blue. Gentlemen, who would be the one to make the decision to adjust the admissions? We all pitched the arguments that Notre Dame, Duke, and Stanford, I will add Michigan to the list. They work with high-achieving academic student-athletes with admissions guidelines. Is UVA the only major conference school that's kind of resistant to academic admissions changes for its revenue sports?
Well, it's the Board of Visitors, I would think. I think they would have to put their stamp of approval on any such kind of thing. And again, I don't think football fans are asking them to dumb down the academics at Virginia. I don't think they're asking them to do anything to devalue the diploma. I think they're just trying to make it a little more equitable for these guys to be able to compete in their own conference against schools that have just as good, or in some cases better, academic reputations than Virginia does.
I mean, you're referencing Duke there, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're referencing Stanford.
Yeah, and Cal. And even Carolina, some people may scoff at that, but their academic rating is pretty high up there.
100%.
So, people that just jump to the assumption, well, we don't want a bunch of dumb jocks coming in here ruining our diplomas or dragging down our reputation. That's not what anybody wants. Even the most rabid football fan doesn't. That's not the aim of all this. It's just to try to make things a little more fair and a little easier for these guys to get into school. Once they get in, they've got to do the work like anybody else. And it's not saying take dummies to get into the program. It's just to be more fair with the hours thing. I mean, you can't ask somebody to come in. Even Tony Elliott said morally he can't ask somebody to come in and expect them to do 60 credit hours of work in 1 year, and it's not fair. But other schools have figured out ways to where they, I think, from what I've been told anyway, to where that's not the case. They've made it a little easier for those guys to survive.
I mean, and another thing that is just being completely lost by the folks that are making the argument, the dumb jock argument, is these football players and basketball players. Hell, I'm even seeing it with play a lot of squash over at the Boarset with the squash players. These guys are working they're working a job that normal students aren't. Being a part of these teams is hours every day in the season. And the football and basketball,
the off season.
And the off season, yeah. And the football and men's basketball team, I mean, this is a year-round job. Like they're traveling, they're working out, and on top of being students. I mean, to say that these are nothing but dumb jocks is just a mischaracterization of what is actually happening.
Oh, no question. I mean, if you talk to these kids, if you sit down and have a conversation with them, you realize that they're not like that at all. These are very intelligent kids.
Their day is
incredibly driven and motivated.
Right. Their day is so micromanaged in time slots and organized versus the average student that may have 2 hours of class every day and a couple hours of study and the rest of the time playing Xbox, doing some partying or doing whatever we used to do when we were in college.
Yeah.
I mean, Hans Montana, on your Twitter account, Bill Belichick's vision for the North Carolina football program would position the Tar Heels as a premier pipeline to the National Football League. Multiple folks are highlighting that UNC is conversating, courting, dating Bill Belichick right now. That, we don't know where it's going to go. The concern by some is his age, but he's got a succession plan with his son.
Yeah, and which is a pretty intelligent plan.
That was a brilliant plan.
I mean, I knew about that before the story even broke because one of the main Carolina beat writers is a good friend of mine, and he told me about this 3 or 4 days before it became newsworthy. And he told me then that at least 3 people on their, I don't know if it's the Board of Visitors, but it's the equivalent to the Board of Visitors, were very, very much interested in bringing Belichick aboard. And
Belichick's plan, the pipeline plan, was brilliantly outlined.
And that, you know, if you know the people in that coaching tribe, as Al Groh used to call it, I'm not a bit surprised by that because those guys were incredibly detailed on everything. But I mean, Belichick came up. His dad was one of the Naval Academy guys, and they were very close to George Welsh and that whole operation, and certainly under the Parcells' thumb print. And Al Groh used to give me incredible insight into how Parcells ran his organization, and it passed down into all those people in his coaching tree. So I'm not a bit surprised how detailed and thought out Belichick's plan was. Those guys don't go on vacation without having a detailed plan on what they're going to do.
Rob Neal watching the program, his James Madison football team seems to have it figured out. Hell, Liberty has it figured out. Liberty's playing in a bowl.
They've played in 5 or 6 straight bowls.
Virginia Tech in a bowl, Liberty in a bowl, JMU in a bowl. Rob Neal says, I would say most players who are going to start for a P4 program have a base level of intellect to understand schemes and strategy that 99% of us could never pick up in a 3-day period like them. I'll hire a kid who can work hard and get a C all day if the effort is there. They might not be 4.0 students at UVA, but give a kid a chance to be a C student, which is darn impressive. I say this all the time. You give me a guy on my team or a resume that comes across my desk for our company that is a athlete that played a team sport at a college level, and I take that athlete that played a team sport at a college level over a student that graduated with a 3.7 or 4.0.
Yeah, because they've proven that they can work and get things accomplished, and that they don't get beat down so easy. If they fail, they get back up and go after it again even harder.
There it is.
And I think
the 3.740 kid probably hasn't failed much in his or her life.
Yeah.
But the college athletes failed every day.
And I believe that sports teaches you things that nothing else in life can. And I think that's why you see a lot of people who are successful in running multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar corporations. A lot of them have athletic backgrounds because they've learned those lessons and they know how to overcome adversity and how to stay motivated and driven. And I think that's one thing. That's a huge benefit that sports can give you that not much else can.
Bob Shada, it hurts to write this, he says, but we should try and aspire to be as good as Duke in football. I agree, and it hurts me to say it.
Al Groh, again, I keep going back to Al Groh, who's a lot wiser than most people ever gave him credit for, but he told Virginia back when the ACC expanded that time, with adding a lot of the Big East teams, that he tried to tell Virginia at that point that, look, we're behind, and now that you've expanded the conference, we're even further behind, and if we don't do something, we're one misstep away from being Duke. Now, Duke then was not Duke now.
No, David Cutcliffe got Duke to where it was going.
Yeah, and they changed some things for Cutcliffe.
They did. Yeah,
I know because I know one of the former Duke coaches very well, and he's told me some things. But
what did he leave as the OC of Tennessee? Right, he was former's OC with the Volunteers,
and had been head coach at Ole Miss.
Yeah, brilliant man.
Yeah, and one of the best offensive minds in the business. And but anyway, Duke then was the doormat of the ACC. They couldn't get out of their own way. They've done. They've probably transformed their program more than anybody in the ACC over the years, and it shows. Look, I mean, look at them now. They've been in bowls for I don't know how many years in a row. I think they had maybe 1 year where they didn't go, but Virginia should aspire to be as good as Duke right now in football, and right now they're not.
Duke Blue Devils 9-3 overall, 5-3 in ACC play this season.
And they just had a coaching change.
They just had a coaching
They're
change.
second in like 4 years or something like that.
Chad Wood, any word on the Cam Robinson rumors that are circulating?
I've heard the rumors, but I don't. Again, we're not privy. We don't get an opportunity to talk to these kids. Once
You want to let them know what the rumors are? The rumors are that transfer portal Cam Robinson.
Yeah, I'm sure that. Again, tampering in college football is at an all-time high, and there are street agents out there and people whispering in your ears, and so and other players talking to you. So from other schools. So I'm sure there's going to be massive temptations there, and for him. I don't know that it'll be about money now because Virginia has the money in its war chest that if it's all about money, they can say, hey, Cam, we'll match any offer that anybody else makes you. But sometimes it's not all about money. It's about wanting to go somewhere where you can win. And, that's another challenge that Tony Elliott and his staff are facing right now. Is money going to be enough to keep some of these guys in the fold, or are they going to want to go somewhere where they feel like they have a chance to go to a bowl game? That's one of the bottom lines.
An hour flies by, hour and 5 minutes in right here. If you're just tuning into the program, this from the Roanoke Times this morning. The Virginia Tech Athletic Department is going to max the revenue sharing payment, I guess I would say, to student athletes this coming academic year. You're allowed the cap for revenue sharing with student athletes is $20,500,000, and its athletic director has now said we're going to max that payment out, and we're going to give $20,500,000 to football, men's basketball, and women's basketball, and very large majority. This is significant news from Blacksburg. The athletic director also said that they are building the war chest now for the following academic year with the idea of having $20.5 million plus, because it's a 4% increase, the cap every year, on hand to pay athletes to suit up for Virginia Tech. This puts a significant pressure and a target on Virginia. Its athletic director, the president of UVA, he's got a target for this. Hootie Ratcliffe, the 11:20 marker of the program, some commentary, some closing thoughts, anything else you want to get out there?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how Virginia reacts to all this and how they do things going forward. They've got more money now than they've ever had. They've got incredible facilities. They have no more excuses, really. Except for that 60-hour obstacle that is forcing Tony Elliott to go after guys in the portal that are grad students or FCS and Ivy League talent. And is that what Virginia is destined to be, is the home of players of that ilk? And if it is, can you compete in the ACC with that talent base?
I mean, if that's what Virginia football becomes, Virginia football should not be in the ACC.
Well, yeah, because you won't be able to compete in the ACC.
You will never be able to compete.
I mean, you can compete, but you won't win. And I think it's as simple as that. I mean,
that's a CAA roster.
When Carla came in and Tony came in, and they both agreed that their goal was to make Virginia the best football program in the country, and that they believed that you could win at a high level and keep the academics where they are without any concessions of any kind. I just shook my head because I think that's the utopian dream, but I don't think it's possible. I mean, prove me wrong. I haven't seen it work anywhere else. And people say, well, Notre Dame does. Well, I'm not so sure that's the case. But and Virginia's not Notre Dame. If Notre Dame can do it, they're probably the only ones that can do it, and they still haven't proven they can do it. They haven't won a national title since 1988.
Notre Dame's got the NBC contract.
Yeah, they have a lot of things going for it that
They're on
Virginia can
broadcast
only
television every game.
dream of. Yeah, and they're sold out stadium every week, and they're a national brand and that sort of thing. But they're in a league of their own in that respect. But
The best comparison is Duke.
yeah.
I mean, Duke is in the conference. They're a state away. They've been an afterthought in football. They've got stringent academic standards. Football was an afterthought for Duke. And then finally, the wealthy alumni said, we need to turn this around. They got an offensive wizard. The head coach they have now, didn't UVA have on a short list at one time?
Well, the previous
head coach, excuse me.
It came down to him and Tony Elliott here,
right.
Apparently. Well, that's what we were told anyway.
Duke is the barometer. I can't believe I'm saying this, man. Duke is the barometer for football.
Yeah.
It's just...
And, I'm very familiar with...
It was laughable 15 years ago.
I used to cover Duke before I came here. And so I know all the ins and outs of Duke. And George Welsh used to hate to go to Duke because it was such a dismal atmosphere for football. I mean, Duke crowds back then were like Virginia crowds were before George. They just came to party and then they would leave. And like George said, they read poetry over the PA system before the game and at halftime. And they used to have a track around their football field inside the stadium, and I mean, it was Duke football was a joke. They had a wooden press box that seated about 30 people, and I mean, it was awful. And look at them now.
What's the head coach?
You can turn things around
Manny Diaz
if you want to, and you get the main alumni, you get the board of visitors, you get the president, you get all the right people behind your program, and you want to do things to make your football team successful. That's what Virginia has to prove, is that they really, truly want to make this football program successful. And, why not? I mean, the motto at Virginia has been, we want excellence for everything that we put our brand on. So why not do it for football? You really don't have to cheapen your education or your diploma to make football successful here. You just don't have to do that.
Well said. Jerry Ratcliffe, JerryRatcliffe.com, the publisher and president of JerryRatcliffe.com, the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer. Since 2013, the Duke football team has had only 4 losing seasons since 2013. And in that period of time, they've been to the Chick-fil-A Bowl, the Sun Bowl, the Pinstripe Bowl, the Quick Lane Bowl, the Independence Bowl, the Military Bowl, and the Birmingham Bowl. They have been to 7 bowl games since 2013. They have a 10-win season in that stretch. They've had 3 coaches, Cutcliffe, Mike Elko, and now Manny Diaz. And currently they're ready for another bowl game. This football team, I cannot believe I'm saying this, is the barometer for Virginia athletics.
They've had 3 coaches in 4 years.
3 coaches in 4 years, yeah. Cutcliffe, Elko, and Diaz.
Yeah, and still win.
And Virginia's had the same coach for 3 years, and has the worst record of any of the power conferences over that 3-year period of time.
Yeah.
And no coaching changes were made.
Right.
And half the roster is empty.
Yeah.
And half the stadium is empty.
Yes.
I mean, just it's been. I just don't understand what's going on here. I could spend 2 hours with this man. He's an A+ person, Jerry Ratcliffe. Judah Wickower, A+ person behind the camera, the director and producer of the program. We've dubbed him the glue guy of the show. We encourage you to visit jerryratcliffe.com. I was on it this morning over a cup of coffee and my Honey Nut Cheerios. jerryratcliffe.com. Thank you kindly for watching the program. So long, everybody.